So when I read the script, I called my agent and said, whatever.
Wow.
It didn't really matter to me. And then he said, no, they want you to play Red.
For 30 years, Shawshank Redemption was seen as flawless. But now the cast is finally revealing what fans were never supposed to know.
Funny enough, later on in my career, I ran into him again on ER, and again.
Hidden feuds, off-camera chaos, and secrets buried for decades are coming to light, and they could change everything you thought you knew about this classic.
But no one knew, and even when it came out, it was, not considered a success. It was nominated for a lot of Academy Awards, but it didn't do well in the box office. Right.
Was Shawshank's legacy built on more than just the movie magic we saw on screen? Let's find out. The Shawshank Redemption is beloved by millions today, but here's the twist. When it first hit theaters, it nearly flopped. A story about hope, friendship, and redemption quietly transformed into one of the most celebrated films of all time. Yet behind its success lies a treasure chest of secrets most fans have never heard. In this deep dive, we'll uncover the behind-the-scenes moments that reshaped how audiences view Andy and Red's journey. From Morgan Freeman's surprising take on his iconic role, to Tim Robbins' hidden acting methods, to shocking casting choices that almost changed the movie forever, these revelations will make you see Shawshank in a completely new light.
I remember reading that script, and it was one of the best I'd ever read. I mean, seriously, that script from beginning to end was... Very little was changed.
Back in the late 1980s, a determined young screenwriter named Frank Darabont dared to approach none other than horror legend Stephen King. His request? Permission to adapt Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, a quiet little novella tucked inside King's different seasons. It was a bold move. The story wasn't horror, it wasn't action-packed. It was slow, reflective, and rooted in themes of hope and loss, the kind of material Hollywood almost never takes a gamble on. Yet against all odds, that gamble changed cinema history. The request was bold, but Stephen King shocked everyone. He handed Frank Darabont the rights for just $1. Yes, $1. It was part of King's little-known Dollar Baby program, where he'd sell the rights to his lesser-known stories to aspiring filmmakers, not for profit, but for passion. No agents, no lawyers, no studio politics, just trust.
Word of mouth doesn't catch you, you ain't going anywhere.
By the early 90s, Darabont's passion project was quietly in motion, free from the usual Hollywood machine. Tim Robbins later reflected during the film's 25th anniversary, "We had no pressure, no massive budget, just a group of people who believed in a story about redemption. And Frank? He had full control. That never happens in this business." Morgan Freeman backed him up with his signature calm. Funny, isn't it? The film that would become a cornerstone of cinema history started out as a side project, and the studios? They were baffled. Columbia Pictures, which eventually distributed the film in 1994, didn't even know how to market it. A prison drama with no action, a title that name-dropped a pinup girl and a fictional town. Executives scratched their heads.
Promote it all you want, but if the first few audiences go there and come back and can't say, I really saw this great film, then you're not going to go very far.
Yet this so-called quiet little film climbed to the top of IMDb's charts, where it held the #1 spot for years. It built a cult following that spanned generations. But this was only the beginning of Shawshank's unlikely journey. Because here's the kicker: the prison where Andy and Red's story unfolds, it wasn't a Hollywood set, it was real. And it left a mark on the cast in ways they could never forget. You can't fake what happened on that set, because it wasn't really a set. The prison you see in the Shawshank Redemption was no Hollywood illusion. It was real, and it carried decades of darkness inside its walls.
Turn to the right! Ice front!
Filming took place inside the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, a towering Gothic beast that had been shut down in 1990 after years of abuse scandals, inmate deaths, and grotesque overcrowding. 4 years later, Darabont's crew walked straight into that rotting tomb, cameras rolling. Clancy Brown, who played the sadistic Captain Hadley, admitted he didn't have to act. Walking through those gates, it was like the place swallowed you. The misery was still in the walls. Tim Robbins went even further. To prepare, he'd lock himself alone in a 6x8 cell, letting the silence choke him. It triggered something in your brain. You didn't have to pretend. The panic was real. And here's the part most people don't know. Many extras weren't actors at all. They were former inmates inmates of the very same prison, men who had once lived in those cells, now reenacting the routines of their own incarceration. Their stares weren't rehearsed, they were haunted, they were remembering.
It's always that way, though. I mean, we don't really say I'm not going to do that, but you have a conversation, and everyone had great intentions on that movie.
Darabont's crew doubled down on the atmosphere, deliberately aging the walls, scrubbing them clean for flashbacks, then dirtying them again to match the passage of years. Almost nobody in the audience noticed, but the actors did. They were trapped in a place that felt alive. Morgan Freeman once summed it up with quiet brutality. When you're filming in a place that real, it stops being make-believe. You're not acting, you're surviving. But if you think the prison itself was the darkest part of Shawshank's legacy, wait until you hear what the cast secretly built into their characters. Backstories so disturbing, the cameras never caught them. Here's the truth most fans never realized. The men of Shawshank weren't just reading lines. They were hiding entire secret lives in plain sight. Lives crafted not by the script, but by the actors themselves. Morgan Freeman didn't just play Red, he rewrote him. In Freeman's private notes, Red wasn't just a smuggler. He was once a respected numbers runner in the black community of the late 1930s, a man of quiet power who lost everything. That's why he could get contraband inside so easily. He'd always been a fixer, a silent mover in the shadows. And when Red first meets Andy, Freeman says he recognized a reflection of himself, a man stripped of influence and thrown to the wolves.
So when I read the script, I called my agent and said, whatever.
Wow.
It didn't really matter to me. And then he said, no, they want you to play Red.
But Tim Robbins went further into the abyss. He didn't just craft a backstory, he split Andy in two. There was the Andy everyone saw, controlled, stiff, cold. And then there was the real Andy, the one who dug through walls and filled a prison with opera. That dual personality ran through every scene. Robbins played him like a man with two faces, one for survival and one for escape. Most audiences never noticed it, but they felt it. Then there was James Whitmore. His Brooks wasn't just a sweet old man. Whitmore carved him straight out of his father's real-life depression. The bird feeding? That wasn't in the script. That was Whitmore channeling his father's loneliness after losing his wife. What looked like a quiet acting choice was actually grief, frozen on film.
It's really very, very disturbing. So that wasn't a reach either, really. You know, 'cause if you live alone, a lot as I do, and then go into a situation.
Every actor smuggled in secrets the cameras never revealed. And maybe that's why these characters still feel more alive than the average Hollywood performance. Because they weren't just acting, they were bleeding. And yet, the strangest what if still hangs over Shawshank. What if Tom Cruise, yes, that Tom Cruise, had played Andy Dufresne? Believe it or not, the Shawshank Redemption almost starred a very different Andy Dufresne, none other than Tom Cruise. Yes, the Hollywood golden boy of the 90s, already commanding massive box office numbers, actually showed up to table reads and rehearsed lines alongside the cast. The studio was ecstatic. On paper, Cruise as Andy looked like a guaranteed hit. But here's the messy part. Cruise wasn't fully sold on the project. The reason? Frank Darabont. At the time, Darabont was practically a nobody, a rookie director without proven credentials. To Cruise, it was a huge gamble. He worried that placing his career in the hands of an unknown might backfire. Insiders say he questioned whether Darabont could handle such a slow-burn, nuanced story without turning it into a complete disaster.
The reason he turned it down is because the director, Frank Darabont, he was lesser known to these big A-listers and all that. So Cruise was like, nah, not for me.
And let's be honest, Cruise's entire brand back then was high-energy charisma, all smirks and sprints. Could audiences have taken him seriously as the quiet, calculating Andy? Many argue the movie would have lost its haunting stillness, its almost meditative rhythm, if Cruise had taken the role. In fact, some claim Cruise walking away may have saved the film from being reduced to another Hollywood star vehicle instead of the timeless classic it became. Tim Robbins, who wasn't a household name, swooped in with that quiet intensity Cruise couldn't or wouldn't deliver. Robbins later admitted he felt lucky the role found me. Lucky is an understatement. If Cruise hadn't flinched, Robbins might have never touched the role that defined his career. So next time you watch Andy's slow, deliberate walk through Shawshank, just imagine it replaced with Cruise's signature sprint. Haunting or hilarious? That's the controversy. The behind-the-scenes drama didn't stop with Andy. The role of Tommy, the young inmate whose testimony nearly changes everything, was almost played by Brad Pitt. At the time, Pitt Pitt was still on the rise, hungry for serious roles. He was cast, ready, and set to bring his boyish charm to Shawshank. But then came Thelma and Louise. In a flash, Pitt went from that guy with potential to Hollywood's sex symbol overnight. Suddenly, Shawshank, a quiet prison drama helmed by an unknown director, looked less like a breakthrough and more like a step backwards. With studios throwing leading man roles his way, Pitt ditched Shawshank to chase bigger paydays. Enter Gil Bellows, a complete unknown making his film debut. At first, it looked like a downgrade. Why trade a rising star for someone nobody had ever heard of? But here's where it gets controversial. Bellows' raw vulnerability turned out to be exactly what the film needed. Without any Hollywood gloss, he made Tommy believable, fragile, and tragically human.
And even when it came out, it was, not considered a success. It was nominated for a lot of Academy Awards, but it didn't do well in the box office.
Darabont himself later admitted that Bellows brought something no star power could have matched. In other words, Pitt might have been too polished, too distracting. Imagine audiences watching Tommy's heartbreaking story but being unable to see past the golden boy looks of Hollywood's hottest new idol. The tragedy might not have landed. It might have just looked like another Hollywood casting stunt. So was Pitt's dropout a career move or a blessing for Shawshank? That's the real debate. Some argue Pitt abandoned art for fame. Others say it was destiny because his absence gave Bellows a shot, and in turn gave Shawshank one of its most unforgettable moments. The Shawshank Redemption isn't just a prison drama, it's a film loaded with secret symbols and coded messages that even die-hard fans often overlook. Over the years, both cast and crew have spilled details that suggest Frank Darabont wasn't just making a movie, he was embedding an entire philosophy of resistance, survival, and rebirth into every frame.
Gobsmacked by the simplicity of it and the sort of the beauty of it. The thematic elements of friendship and hope being so nourishing to the human spirit, it just really spoke to me.
Take Tim Robbins' revelation. Andy is constantly framed behind bars, fences, stair rails, and shadowed lines, even when he's outside his cell. Darabont didn't leave that to chance. He wanted audiences to subconsciously feel Andy's suffocating existence, that he was spiritually caged long before he crawled through that sewer pipe. Unlike the other inmates, Andy wasn't imprisoned by guilt. He was shackled by innocence, forced to carry the unbearable weight of truth in a world built on lies. And then there's Morgan Freeman's insight about the rooftop scene. Everyone remembers it as that golden moment of sunlight, a fleeting taste of freedom with cold beers in hand. But beneath the surface, it was Andy's power grab. By managing Hadley's finances, Andy wasn't just helping the guards, he was planting the foundation of his second identity, the prison's financial ghost, a man who could move money without leaving fingerprints. What looks like camaraderie is actually the birth of Andy's double life.
And we had a beautiful script to work with, and we had great actors and a lot of camaraderie. And it was a delightful summer, I thought. I had a good time.
But the most chilling symbolism comes from Red's famous line, "Get busy living or get busy dying." Sounds inspiring, right? Not so fast. Clancy Brown revealed that Darabont kept the line plastered on the production office wall throughout filming, almost like a manifesto. That one phrase isn't just dialogue, it's the film's skeleton. Every single arc, Brooks carving "Brooks was here," Andy blasting opera music, even Red's own parole monologues ties back to that brutal binary. Hope or despair, life or death. There's no middle ground. And here's where the controversy hits. Some scholars argue Darabont was sneaking in a larger critique of American life itself. The prison becomes a metaphor for society. Work your meaningless job, play by the rules, and you'll still end up broken. The system doesn't rehabilitate, it crushes. Andy's escape isn't just about one man breaking free. It's about tearing off the shackles of an entire machine designed to trap people in cycles of obedience. So when Andy emerges from the tunnel, arms outstretched in the rain, it isn't just liberation, it's baptism, rebirth. A man shedding the skin of conformity and stepping into a world he rebuilt on his own terms.
The thing in the sludge that I was crawling through was a lot safer than the water I fell into. Because the water I fell into was in farm country. So it was filled with cow urine and,
Next time you watch Shawshank, look closer. The bars aren't just steel, the rooftop isn't just sunlight, and that opera isn't just music. They're hidden signals, warnings, and maybe even a radical challenge to viewers themselves. Are you living, or are you already dying inside the system? Few things in the Shawshank Redemption are as iconic as the posters covering Andy's cell wall. On the surface, they're clever props, pin-ups masking the tunnel of freedom. But here's the kicker. Those posters are loaded with meaning. They're not just decoration, they're a secret timeline of Andy's transformation, and maybe even Darabont's critique of American culture. Tim Robbins once explained that the posters weren't random choices. They map Andy's mental and emotional journey over 19 brutal years behind bars. The first is Rita Hayworth, Hollywood's golden era goddess. She symbolizes glamour, innocence, and the world Andy came from, the life he once knew before it was ripped away. Rita is nostalgia, Andy's anchor to the past, but also a cruel reminder of the freedom he lost. Then comes Marilyn Monroe, the icon of the late 50s and early 60s. On the surface, she's about beauty and desire, but beneath that image lies tragedy and complexity. Monroe was America's symbol, but also a victim of the system that created her. That's no accident. By the time Andy pins her up, he's starting to understand the corrupt power structures both inside Shawshank and outside in the real world. Monroe represents Andy's awakening, his realization that innocence doesn't survive long in a world designed to exploit. Finally, we see Raquel Welch in 1 million years BC, a cave woman in primal animalistic form. Stripped of Hollywood polish, Welch is raw survival. By now, Andy has reached his breaking point. Civilization, law, justice, all illusions. To win freedom, he must crawl through filth, sludge, and sewage. Welch doesn't just cover the escape tunnel, she embodies it. Andy is reborn through the muck, reverting to primal instincts in order to emerge pure on the other side. Frank Darabont himself admitted the symbolism was intentional, noting how each poster gets progressively more revealing. But here's where the controversy kicks in. Some critics argue that the posters aren't just Andy's story, they're America's. Rita Hayworth is the innocence of post-war America. Marilyn Monroe is the corruption and consumerism of the Cold War era. And Raquel Welch is the raw chaos of a country that must strip down to survive its own sins. Andy's tunnel? It's not just one man's escape, it's a metaphor for clawing your way out of the system's rot. And that final shot, the Raquel Welch poster flapping in the wind after Andy's escape, that's not just a reveal of a hole in the wall. It's the destruction of a false idol, the last mask torn away. Andy leaves behind Hollywood illusions, societal shackles, even his own identity as a banker. He steps into freedom not as the man society defined, but as the man he remade himself to be. So next time you watch Shawshank, look closer. Those posters aren't just eye candy. They're Andy's secret diary. They're Darabont's social commentary. And they might just be the most subversive symbols in the whole film. One of the most overlooked but powerful storytelling tools in the Shawshank Redemption isn't dialogue or even acting, it's the weather. Frank Darabont used rain, thunder, and sunlight as silent narrators, shaping the emotional rhythm of the film in ways most audiences never consciously register. Morgan Freeman himself admitted years later, "Notice how it's always raining when something terrible happens." And he's right. The first brutal assault on Andy by the sisters, rain. Tommy's shocking death in the yard, rain. The warden's self-destruction, rain. It's as if the heavens themselves condemn the violence and corruption of Shawshank, pouring down misery on the men trapped inside.
So I came out of a river of fuller's earth and fell into a river of crap.
But then look at Andy's escape. He doesn't sneak out under clear skies. He's reborn in a thunderstorm. The storm is chaos, danger, and destruction. Yet for Andy, it's liberation. Every lightning strike and crash of thunder masks, his hammer blows against the sewage pipe. Nature itself conspires with him, covering his rebellion with violent noise. It's not just a jailbreak. It's an act of divine defiance, with the storm as his ally. And then comes the most telling shift of all. When Red finally reunites with Andy on that Mexican beach, the film does something extraordinary. For the first and only time, the weather is clear, bright, and perfect. The gray pall that has covered every other outdoor scene vanishes. The sun blazes, the sky is endless, and for the first time, the audience breathes. Freeman once noted, "The sun doesn't truly shine until the very end." And he's right. It's freedom visualized, hope made flesh. But here's where the controversy creeps in. Some critics argue that Darabont was sneaking in a religious subtext. The storm during Andy's escape, a baptism, rain cleansing him of the filth, literal and spiritual, of Shawshank. His arms stretched to the sky, lightning crashing around him, is less about survival and more about resurrection. Then, the final beach scene isn't just sunlight, it's paradise, heaven itself. Others take a darker view, that Darabont deliberately kept Shawshank under eternal gloom to reflect America's prison industrial complex, a system designed to crush hope. The sun doesn't shine there because freedom, justice, and light don't exist inside its walls. Only by breaking the system, literally tunneling out of it, can one touch the light. So the next time you watch Shawshank, don't just follow the story. Watch the skies. The rain mourns, the thunder rebels, and the sun redeems. The weather isn't background, it's the film's most important storyteller. For countless fans, the emotional peak of The Shawshank Redemption comes when Red finally chooses hope, boarding that bus to Mexico with the immortal words, "Get busy living or get busy dying." That's goddamn right, it feels inevitable now, like the story was always building to that moment. But here's the shocker. It wasn't in the original script. In a 2014 interview, Morgan Freeman revealed the truth. Frank Darabont had finished editing, but something felt missing, something vital. Originally, the film ended with Red walking across a field after his parole, his future uncertain. No beach, no reunion, no definitive closure, just ambiguity.
Red being the observer, Red being the guy who takes it all in, well, that's what writers are. We take it in and we try to interpret it.
The studio loved that ending. Why? It was cheaper, cleaner, and in their eyes, more serious cinema. In fact, Warner Bros. Executives pushed hard to cut the entire Mexico reunion, arguing the movie was already too long and audiences didn't need to see Andy and Red together again. But Darabont fought back. Hard. Insiders claim heated arguments broke out in the editing room, with Darabont insisting that without Red's transformation, the story was incomplete. The film isn't just about Andy's physical escape, Freeman explained. It's about Red's mental and emotional liberation. And that's the controversial twist. Without the late addition of Red's bus ride and the final beach scene, Shawshank would have been a very different movie, more bleak, more cynical, maybe even forgettable. Darabont risked studio backlash and possibly his career to keep that ending, and he was right. That final reunion didn't just give closure, it redefined the story from a tale of endurance into one of redemption. But here's the kicker. Some critics argue the studio's version might have been truer to Stephen King's novella, which ended ambiguously. They claim the Mexico ending wrapped things up too neatly, Hollywood style, stripping the story of its raw realism. Was Darabont giving audiences what they needed? Hope? Or was he betraying King's vision to win box office love? That debate still rages today.
So it had lasting power because of its Ted Turner had the rights to it and started to play it on his television.
What's undeniable is this. Without that late addition, Red's story would have ended in limbo. Instead, it gave the world one of the most cathartic final scenes in cinema history. A moment where not one man, but two, finally broke free from their prisons. Brooks Hatland's tragic arc, an elderly inmate so shattered by Shawshank that he can't survive outside its walls, is one of the most unforgettable gut punches in the entire film. His story is quiet, devastating, and universally remembered. But here's the twist. In Stephen King's novella, Brooks was practically invisible, a passing mention, a shadow. It was Frank Darabont who dragged that shadow into the light. James Whitmore, the veteran actor who embodied Brooks, revealed, "In the source material, Brooks was just a brief mention. Frank saw something deeper. What Darabont saw wasn't just a subplot. It was the heartbeat of the film." Brooks represented institutionalization in its purest, most terrifying form. Men so conditioned by bars, rules, and routine that freedom itself becomes the cruelest punishment of all. And here's where the controversy explodes. The studio didn't want it. Executives flat out argued Brooks had no place in the movie. To them, he slowed the pace, distracted from Andy's escape, and dragged the narrative into depressing side story territory. They wanted action. They wanted suspense. They wanted the great escape, not the story of an old man strangled by freedom.
My favorite character in the whole piece, though, is James Whitmore as Brooks. And probably because my experience working with him was so it remains so vivid. It was so rewarding.
Darabont, by all accounts, went to war for Brooks. He reportedly told them, "Without Brooks, Red's story means nothing. Brooks chose fear. Red chooses hope. You can't have one without the other." And he was right. Without Brooks, Red's release is stripped of weight. We've seen the ghost of what happens when institutionalization wins. Brooks's farewell letter is the haunting shadow looming over Red's every decision, which makes his eventual "so was Red" not just a message, it's a rebellion. It's defiance against the system that broke Brooks. Some critics have gone further, arguing Brooks's arc is the real Shawshank story. Andy may get the headlines with his great escape, but Brooks is the unflinching mirror. His life is the proof that the system doesn't rehabilitate. It mutilates. It doesn't free men. It breaks them into submission, then spits them out into a world they no longer recognize. In a sense, Brooks didn't commit suicide. Shawshank did.
We shot in a real prison, and in an empty prison. And that, as you say, the sweat and all the rest of it, the voices and the presence of those men that had been incarcerated there was omnipresent.
And this is where the studio's pushback looks downright damning. Cutting Brooks wouldn't have just been a creative misstep. It would have been a cover-up. His story isn't extra. It's the film's most radical indictment of prison, of authority, of society's failure to care for the broken once the walls fall away. Removing Brooks would have turned Shawshank into just another glossy prison break fantasy. Keeping him made it a devastating truth bomb about the human cost of institutional power. Bob Gunton's chilling portrayal of Warden Norton wasn't some exaggerated Hollywood villain. It was disturbingly close to reality. His character was inspired by a real mid-20th century prison official who was later convicted of exploiting inmates to renovate his personal home. Gunton revealed that Frank Darabont even handed him old newspaper clippings for research. This man was a master of hypocrisy, publicly a moral, God-fearing Christian, yet privately abusing prisoners and embezzling money.
Mark 1335. Always like that one.
That hypocrisy became Norton's defining trait. He weaponizes scripture to justify his cruelty, quoting the Bible as he launders money and crushes lives. He hides behind religion, not to find salvation, but to shield his corruption. His fall is brutal not because of justice. It's because his entire illusion of righteousness collapses in an instant. As Gunton explained, he couldn't handle losing the power and respect he falsely believed were his due. That destruction was unbearable.
And he says, how can you be so obtuse? And that to me was like a bullet, because part of what the warden's relationship with Andy is, I'm the boss.
And here's where it gets controversial. Norton isn't just a character. He's an indictment. He embodies a real archetype, the pious leader who hides behind faith while exploiting the powerless. The fact that his performance was drawn from reality makes the character less fictional villain and more mirror held up to society. That's why Norton lingers in the audience's mind long after the credits roll. His cruelty doesn't feel like a screenplay invention. It feels like a headline you might read today. He's a reminder that sometimes the darkest monsters don't hide in shadows. They hide in pulpits, offices, and positions of authority, cloaked in respectability while rotting from within. Most casual viewers walk away from The Shawshank Redemption assuming the title refers to Andy Dufresne's escape, his vindication after decades of wrongful imprisonment. But according to the cast and crew, that's only the surface. The real redemption isn't about one man crawling through a tunnel. It's about the rebirth of the human spirit in a place built to destroy it. Tim Robbins put it plainly. The title isn't just about Andy being redeemed through his escape. It's about the redemption of humanity inside a place designed to strip humanity away. Andy redeems Shawshank itself. He turns the grim prison roof into a moment of brotherhood with a bucket of cold beer. He redeems the dusty storage room into a thriving library. He redeems his cell walls with carvings and classical music, transforming confinement into creation. Even while secretly plotting his escape, he gives hope to men who had forgotten how to dream.
You're reminded, and I try to remind myself daily that whatever the problems are, as long as you're drawing breath, you can overcome those problems.
Morgan Freeman offered a brutally honest perspective on Red's arc. For decades, Red played the system, telling the parole board what he thought they wanted to hear, groveling for approval that never came. But his redemption isn't found in his release papers. It's in that moment when he stops pretending. I don't give a damn what you think. That's when Red becomes authentic. That's when he frees himself, long before he ever steps outside those walls. And here's the controversial twist. Maybe Shawshank isn't even about Andy at all. Maybe Andy is just the catalyst, and Red is the true redemption story. Without Andy's relentless defiance, Red becomes Brooke, swallowed by fear. With Andy's influence, Red dares to hope, and that hope redeems him in ways parole papers never could. That's why the Shawshank Redemption endures. It isn't about escaping prison. It's about refusing to let prison, any prison, steal your soul. One of the most jaw-dropping secrets about the Shawshank Redemption is that the film almost ended in a way that would have robbed it of its soul. The iconic beach reunion, the single image that countless fans carry in their hearts, was nearly erased by studio executives who believed audiences didn't need it. Yes, the same Hollywood system that churns out cookie-cutter endings nearly destroyed one of the most powerful finales in cinematic history. Warner Bros. Executives insisted that ending with Red on the bus was more artistic and less sentimental. Translation? They thought viewers didn't deserve the satisfaction of closure. Frank Darabont didn't just disagree, he went to war for that ending. They thought Red on the bus was enough. But Shawshank isn't about dangling hope like a carrot. It's about hope delivered. Without seeing Andy and Red together, the audience would leave the theater feeling cheated. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The battle got heated. Insiders later revealed that the studio feared the beach scene would test poorly with audiences, branding it too happy, too clean. Imagine that. The very moment that cements Shawshank as a masterpiece was considered a liability. Tim Robbins later revealed a detail that makes this all even more shocking. The beach reunion was the first thing filmed. Frank wanted the scene raw, tentative, two men reconnecting before Morgan and I had built months of screen chemistry. That awkwardness you see? It's real. Ironically, the executives wanted to delete the most natural, understated moment of all. So here's the controversy. Had the suits won, The Shawshank Redemption would not be the film we know today. It might not have become the most beloved movie of all time. It might not sit atop IMDb's #1 spot for decades. It might have been remembered as that bleak Stephen King prison film with a vague ending. Hollywood almost buried hope on that beach. And if Darabont hadn't fought tooth and nail, the world's most inspiring prison story might have ended not with redemption, but with compromise. Thomas Newman's score for The Shawshank Redemption isn't just background sound, it's the film's invisible narrator. It guides the audience through despair, resilience, and finally, hope, often without them even realizing it. But here's the kicker. Despite its brilliance, Hollywood overlooked it, handing the Oscar instead to The Lion King. Tim Robbins once explained it perfectly. Early prison scenes have this austere, almost mechanical quality to the music. By the end, there's warmth and even joy in the orchestration. That's not accidental. Newman built his score to evolve alongside Andy. In the beginning, it's rigid and suffocating, echoing the dehumanizing grind of prison life. But by the time Andy's spirit begins to shine through, the music itself has softened, expanded, and dared to breathe. It's hope sneaking into Shawshank, not through speeches, but through sound. One of the score's most devastating moments comes during the Brooks Was Here sequence. Instead of leaning on melodrama, Newman's music is almost fragile, delicate. James Whitmore said it best. That music doesn't tell you how to feel about Brooks. It's not manipulative. Instead, it captures his profound confusion and sadness at finding himself free, but more imprisoned than ever. In that moment, the score isn't just accompanying the story. It is the story. And here's where controversy enters the picture. Newman's score lost the Academy Award to Hans Zimmer's The Lion King. Critics and scholars have called it one of the Oscars' greatest blunders. Zimmer's score was sweeping, bold, and obvious, a perfect fit for a Disney juggernaut. But Newman's work was something else entirely. Subtle, restrained, and devastatingly human. The Academy chose spectacle over substance, bombast over quiet genius. So the next time you hear those opening notes, remember, this isn't just music, it's hope itself, smuggled past Hollywood gatekeepers, still resonating long after the Academy got it wrong. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.